If we look back to Luke's design, we can see that the Hit Me button has a nice little white border around the edges. How can we accomplish that effect with SwiftUI? Luckily, it's actually really easy thanks to SwiftUI's powerful support for creating shapes and then filling and stroking them with colors. Before we start to see how we can apply shapes to solve the particular challenge of the Hit Me button, let's learn the basics of drawing shapes with SwiftUI.
I think the easiest way to learn how to draw shapes in SwiftUI is to just play around with it a bit. So we're going to create a new view here only for the purpose of learning how to draw shapes. So go ahead and right-click the views group and select New File, and go to SwiftUI, View Template, click Next, and we'll call this shapes.swift. As you know, I like my two-space tab, so I'm going to hit Control-I to get to that. And we're going to replace the body of shapes with the following. Delete that little text view there. And we're going to put a VStack, because we'll be adding several things to this later. And we're going to put a circle in the VStack. And let me hit turn on the preview so you can see what's happening as I'm typing this. So you can see that we've drawn a circle and it's filled up as much space as possible for this view by default. And we're also going to set the background of this view to color.green. It's just going to help us visualize what's going on here a little bit better. We have drawn a circle, but I want to show you how you can make the circle be a specific width and height. Actually, you can do this with any kind of view. So we're going to click on the plus here and go to a view modifier. And there should be one here called frame. Let me see where that is. Yeah, here we go. In layout frame. So we're going to drag that in, and this allows you to set a width and a height on any view. So we're going to set, for now, we're going to set it to be 200 for width, and 100 is fine for height. So what's going on with the sizing here? So a view will be sized as much space as is needed. So this circle here has a frame of 200 wide and 100 tall. And the circle is drawn to be as big as it can be within that space. So a circle's got to be, it couldn't be an ellipse. It takes up the entire space. It's got to be a circle so it doesn't take up the full space that's available to it. Now, the shapes view is as big as it needs to contain all the things inside, which right now there's only one thing in it, so it's exactly the same size as this circle shape is, which is 200 by 100. Okay, so we've sized our circle to a specific size. What else can we do with shapes? Well, we can fill them with a specific color if we want. So let's just type in fill so I don't have to figure out what this is. Okay, so it's a shape modifier. So let me back that up and show you where that is. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Here we go. We have different modifiers for shapes here, and I'm going to drag in fill. And we'll leave it for now as the default color blue, and start up our previews with Command Option P again. And guess what? We're getting that error. We've seen this before. Value of type some view has no member fill. Why is that? Well, ordering matters. This frame is returning a regular view, but you can only apply a fill to a circle shape. So we just need to move that up. So we'll use Command Option bracket to move that up one. And now we see it filled the way we want. So fill is only one of the things you can do. Let me comment that out again. There's a bunch of other options that we have here down in shapes. For example, there's one called stroke. So I'm going to drag that in, and it allows us to pass in, if we open the parentheses to see what we can do with this, there's one that has a line width. So it lets us specify a color and a line width. So we'll leave it as color blue, and for line width, let's set that to 20. Okay, so you can see here that it's given us a nice stroke, but you may wonder what's happening here because it's going outside of the boundary that we gave the circle for its frame. So it turns out that by default, when you stroke a shape, you can imagine, let me just do it with 1 point for a second. So you can see if you do 1 point, the stroke that it draws is basically half of the stroke is on the left of the boundary of the circle and half is on the right. And this could cause it to go outside of the frame, because the actual circle is like in the inside track of this circle, which fits perfectly within the frame. But then when you stroke it, it can go outside of the frame. So how do you fix that? Well, there's a couple ways to fix this. The first thing is we can call inset, and we can use half of the size of the stroke. And what inset does is it basically shrinks the shape down by the amount you inset it by. So if we had it 200 by 100, the inset shape would be like 180 by 80 instead. And that way we know, it's going to be half over, so it'll be perfectly within there. But there's an even better way. If you're trying to inset something specifically because of the stroke border, there's another variant of stroke called stroke border that you can use instead. And we're going to use the line width one again. And we're going to do color.blue, line width 20.0. And this anti-aliased is optional, so I'm just going to delete that. And you'll see here that by using the stroke border variant, that's the equivalent of calling inset and then stroke, but one less line of code. So it's a little bit nicer that way. All right, I'm going to get rid of that fill, and let's add in some other shapes. So we've seen circle. There's some other shapes in here, and you can see all of the shapes here as well in this tab. So they're down here in other. So you can see there's rounded rectangle. In fact, let's just drag in a bunch of them. So we're going to drag in rounded rectangle. I'll fix that up in a minute. And what else do we want to see? We'll drag in capsule. And we'll drag in ellipse. Okay, so for the first one, rounded rectangle, we're going to need a corner radius. So I'm just going to put in 20.0. So here's my rounded rectangle, there's my capsule, there's my ellipse. Now let's style these a little bit. For now, we're going to fill them with blue. And we're going to set the frame just the same way we did earlier. So I'm going to paste that. And then I'm going to use the same styling for the other two as well. Here we go. So you can play around with this more if you want to just try different view modifiers that you can find here in the object library if you want to try to see what different shapes look like. But this is a good little playground we can use to just test and see what we can do with shapes in SwiftUI.
Okay, now that you understand the basics of working with shapes with SwiftUI, how can we use this to add the border around the Hit Me button? One way of doing this is to simply draw a rounded rectangle with a white stroke on the top of the Hit Me button. We can do that with the Z-stack, but I want to show you an alternative way by using the overlay view modifier. Let's dive in.
All right, we're going to go back to content-view.swift. I'm going to scroll down to our Hit Me button. And at the bottom of all of our view modifiers here, we're going to add an overlay. So an overlay is a view that gets drawn on top of everything else. It's alternative to putting it inside a Z-stack and putting something on top of that, I suppose. So what we're going to put inside our overlay is a rounded rectangle, and that just takes a single parameter for the corner radius, which for us, if you look at Luke's design, is 21.0. Actually, it matches this corner radius right here. And we want to do that stroke border. Again, I could have dragged it in from here, but it's easy enough to just type it in as well. And the one we want here is the one that has the color and line width and that optional parameter, which we won't need, which is anti-aliased. And we're going to set this to white, and we're going to set the stroke to 2.0. And we're going to get rid of that optional parameter there. And we have a white border. It's kind of hard to see in this view in light mode, but if we go down here to dark mode, it's really easy to see. And you can see that that white border is a really nice touch and really makes it pop.